Welcome to this edition of the Men's Room Show. I am super excited to have Eugene Z. Bertrand here with me today because the topic that he has at hand comes right in the line of celebrating International Men's Day. And what we're going to be talking about this evening is all about toxic masculinity. And so we'll be talking about what it is, what it's not, healing, the resilience that comes with doing the inner work, and just reimagining manhood. And so that's where we're going to take the conversation this evening. And so, Eugene, will you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about who you are and why this conversation is important today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Eugene Z. Bertrand, and I am a Master of Social Work candidate at Columbia University in the city of New York. And I am the author of Resilience Breaking the Chains, a brand new book that I just came out with. And I'm super happy to be here. I think in our society we don't have a lot of space to have these conversations. And Linda, I'm very passionate about talking about these things. So I appreciate you opening the space and holding the space for us to have this conversation here today.
And I appreciate you having I guess, the courage to move forward with all of this because I know it didn't start that way. It's something that came
Yeah,
with time.
definitely.
All right.
It wasn't easy at all.
So, so the question I have right out of the gate is this one. So, as you were growing up, what were the expectations of masculinity?
I think I have a few things to say here, Linda. I think as a kid, I I was a kid that was just very, let's say, out there, right? Like I was somebody that was very hyperactive, and so I think that I was very interested in kind of learning different things and asking a lot of different questions and being in different spaces all at once. And, I think at the same time, I was also the kid that was trying to make sense of what a man meant. So I grew up, really, I say that I was raised by a single mom, um, but I really grew up with one parent who made emotional safety feel possible, and another parent where whose idea of masculinity was built on toughness and silence. And I think that having that contrast, Linda, really it impacted me very deeply and v helped to kind of shape me very early. Like I learned to stay strong, stay composed, and keep a lot of my inner world hidden. And I didn't know it then, but I was already being taught in this way that feelings were something to manage, not to really express. And because I'm so close with my mom, I also learned in the same way that it is okay to do that. But like it was like the devil and the angel on your shoulder. That's one person that is showing you one thing and the other person that's showing you another thing. And I think to your question, like growing up as a boy, you're trying to figure out your place. And so you're just constantly going back and forth. Like, do I show my emotions? Will that make me a bad kid? Do I not do it? It's just like a constant back and forth type of thing.
I was just going to say it sounded like you were wrestling with yourself on because you had two examples to draw from. So you had your mom
Oh,
who you were close to and raising you, and then you had another male figure. And that must have been, I mean, in addition to wrestling with yourself, did you find that you swayed to one side or the other?
I think I've always been very close to my mom. And so I feel like I've always kind of swayed towards her. Um, but I think also recognizing um that like when you're growing up, you're learning things every single day. You're learning all these different new things, but you're also learning about yourself. It was hard because I was like just wrestling like with like what does being a man mean? Like I grew up hearing terms like being the man of the house or like men don't do this, men don't do that. And at least for me, I don't use those terms now, being 23, because I recognize that that's not like it's not helpful. Like that's not really here or there. You can be a person and you can be a conscientious member of society and wear your heart on the sleeve. That doesn't necessarily take away from your masculinity.
I appreciate you speaking to the terms that people use, like being the man of the house, manning up, hold the fort, all these different things that
Yeah,
you could speak to. And, some of them are sayings and, they've been around for a long time. Some of them have a deeper impact when you use them. And
right.
and because you were close to your mom, what terms did she use when she's raising you? I'm curious. Were they on the other side where they were a little softer about expressing yourself and your emotions, or was it more of the traditional, like what we just spoke to? Which did she
My
use?
mom never really like engaged in that vernacular. So I think by way, I never really grew up utilizing that because I knew how that made me feel. I knew that I didn't like hearing that because it's almost like you're not saying that to my sister. Like, what does being the man of the house mean? What does man up mean? And so I recognize my mom, she never really used to use that type of vernacular. My mom's always been very good at just kind of saying things without using like specifying like a specific gender. Um, because she recognizes that we think very similarly. Like being the man of the house is really neither here or there. Like that doesn't like what does that mean? Like, and I think I still kind of like I'm trying to understand what that means. Like phrases like man up. What about me is not man enough that I have to man up? You know what I'm saying? It's certain things
Oh,
like
yeah, I
that.
know exactly what you're saying as far as like your mom's parenting style because I have two sons and a daughter. And
Mhm.
so I've always uh parented that I didn't use those traditional type messages. You'd never hear me saying those either.
Right.
And any more than I would like tell my daughter, well, that's what guys do. What are you doing? Or to my sons, like, oh, that's a little bit feminine. Let's, reel it in.
Hmm.
I would
Yeah.
never speak that way. And so I've always um advocated for the person that they are
Yeah.
because who's to say that your interests, the way you hold yourself, the way you move through the world should follow these more traditional type scripts? Because I think it's limiting in building your character and shaping who you are to do that. And
Yeah.
so since you had the both of them and you had one you resonated with, you also had the other one that you didn't resonate with.
Right.
And, and so because you saw both and you were wrestling, are there any behaviors or directions that you went that looking back, you're like, why did I feel that way? Because I know that some men, for example, um, are thinking that they need to be stoic or they
Mhm.
need to be able to in like in dating to be able to ask a woman out. There's a certain type of way that a man would do that and they try to aspire to that and it may be incongruent to actually who they are as a person. It doesn't align with them, and so when they're out of alignment they feel very stressed about trying to fit this ideal. And so have you felt any of that yourself?
Good question, Linda. I think like for me and my experiences, I think the one thing that I could say I've seen is like that I've modeled in my life is shutting down. like when topics are difficult, right? Not out of like in a sense of like malicious, not like within like malintent, but I recognize that shutting down could also be like a way that you process something because you're not able to say what you want to say. It's almost kind of like you're stuck. And I think for me, I've definitely have shut down. I've definitely shut down a few times. And what I've recognized is that's also like a trauma response, and we don't talk enough about that and what that is like. But I think for me, in terms of like dating, like and being in a relationship with women, like I just try to stay true to myself, right? And I think me being the type of man to just like be very honest with um people in general, like I'm out here sharing my story, saying I'm a survivor of domestic violence. You know me, Linda. Like when what you see is what you get, and take it or leave it. I think it's really difficult though for some men in our society to stay true to that, and I think that's because of the pressure that I think male figures have had on them, because of the pressure that society puts on them, like being a real man can look differently to different people. And I, I can confidently say that I'm a man. I'm confidently saying I'm a real man. And because I wear my heart on my shoulder, that doesn't take away from my masculinity. That makes me even a better man because I'm able to sit there and say, this is something that's bothering me. This is how I feel. And, I think we have to start from there, recognizing that there's no such thing as being a real man. What are the guidelines of that? What does one have to be a real man? Like these are questions that, I think about. Like, what does that mean? Who classifies as that? Who fits into that category? And why is that? You know?
Yeah, yeah, I do know, and the reason why I was asking because like, I come across it quite often to my
Yeah.
friends, coworkers, and I'm seeing a little bit of a shift and change where men are
Yeah.
being more expressive, and
Yeah.
and there's that empathy that's taking place more than I've seen. But then I also see, the opposite being true, where I'm seeing men who are choosing, and maybe it's to their style, but they're really carrying a lot of things to prove to themselves and everyone else that they can go out and meet a challenge. They can be disciplined and stick with it and keep
Yeah.
going no matter what. And I'm seeing some burnout signs and symptoms, so to me, being a real man does not mean you go, go, go until you drop. No, a real
Yeah.
man is what you're describing, where he's secure enough in himself to know what his limits are, because we all
Yeah.
have physical and emotional limits.
Limits.
And and at the same time, I think that he would be centered on the growth of himself. So being his best self or best version of him and not looking to compare and
Yeah.
not setting up unrealistic or incongruent ideals of how he needs to show up. And I
Yeah.
think the more that you try to put yourself into that place and space where I should do this, I
Yeah.
need to be this, I
Right.
must, go at all costs. Then you set yourself up for not being able to be that solid man. And so, women wrestle with some of these things too. How should a woman show up? Should she be command and control of and be able to work a room and lead projects and things, let's say, or should she be
Hmm.
more soft and take some directions and do some things that are a little bit more of that nurturing side
Yeah.
that we do as
And
like mothers, for example.
yeah.
So being a woman, I wrestle with those things too. But you are
Right.
very true when you say that shutting down thing is a trauma response.
It
It,
is.
it's a trigger, a trauma response, or um, that not feeling safe and secure in self
Yeah,
and your surroundings. That yes, that is definitely something that will surface. So tell me a little bit about how that trauma response is different than the one that you just spoke of about how a man should show up. How is it different?
I think with a trauma response, I think specifically when you shut down in that way, um, your body's trying to protect you from something, and your brain's trying to figure out what that is. Your body's trying to figure out what that is. And what I've recognized is that when something feels like overwhelming or threatening or too painful
Mhm.
to handle, your system goes into survival mode. Like, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, and so instead of fighting or running or talking about the whatever that thing might be that's maybe too painful to handle or too painful to talk about, some people freeze or they shut their emotions off, and that's what shutting down looks like. It's literally like your body's way or like in your mind's way of saying, okay, this is too much right now. Let me numb it so you can get through it. And I recognize as well, like it's not necessarily like a weakness, but it's really just your body trying to keep you safe when you don't feel safe. And I think that the problem is when the shutdown continues long after the danger is gone, then it starts getting in the way of things like connection, joy, healing, and all these different things. And what was the other part of your question?
I was asking, you know, how that was different than the ideals that men put on themselves. And so you just described the difference when it's a trauma response,
Yeah.
it's that safety, and then it becomes this thing that becomes a part of your personality
Yeah.
and how you approach things that affect all of what you just said, your future relationships. So that's where they're different. It
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of these things I recognize are intrinsically motivated. So it comes with different experience, it comes with different time, and it has to come within yourself. That's what I always kind of think about. It comes with different people's experiences, it comes with different people's times, but it's has to be intrinsically motivated. I think for me, because I've been there, like I've been in relationships with women and I've shut down because a topic has triggered me. Not necessarily because I'm like doing it intentionally, but at that time, I don't, at the times, I don't know if I really came to terms fully with the things that were hard for me to talk about until after, right? And then I I feel like a lot of times, a men, we can get down on ourselves, and then these emotions can show up in so many different ways. But I think it's so important to just allow yourself to be gracious. Be graceful to yourself. Like it's so important to have grace for different situations, but to also have grace for yourself because every single day you're learning something new. And if you don't think about these things in a way of, okay, I shut down this time, but when I'm in this situation, what is something that I can do to help myself so that I don't shut down for as long as I did last time? I mean, you can like just gradually kind of work your way up to then to where you know you recognize your triggers, you recognize what your escape plan might be, you recognize a situation that might not be the best situation for you, and you take care of yourself, you know. But I think what I'm trying to say is it's so important to have grace with yourself because like I've been there and I had to have grace with myself because I recognize not only am I like just 20, freshly 23, but I'm still learning. And if I can learn this at 23, it can be learned at 73. You know, there's no time stamp on having grace for yourself.
Thank you so much for addressing this
Yeah.
because I've had this conversation with men in your age group,
Yeah,
And it's very common. You feel like you're all by yourself within these feelings of, getting triggered by something, or, that freezing when something happens. And I've said to individuals, you have to have that grace with yourself, and you have to be able to call it in the moment. So if you're having anxiety, you can say, that situation really brought a lot of anxiety to me,
exactly.
feeling in my body. And you know what? You said this is, what can I do in that moment to maybe calm myself? And what can I
Yep,
do to make the iterations as you are learning how to navigate that be shorter and shorter duration? Because, you know, the argument or challenge that I was met with in some of these conversations was, well, it sounds really simple to name that thing that's going on. It sounds really simple to have gratitude, but how is the negative self-talk or that freezing going to go away if it's always coming up? And, how can I really get through this? And I said, you have to go through it, and you can't escape it, but
uh,
and it's going to be in your body. So I said, you're doing the right thing. You recognize that you're feeling in your body when it happens, and
yeah,
figure out different ways to name it, and to be okay feeling anxious.
exactly.
You have to be okay feeling anxious. and and the other thing that had come up in some of these conversations was, well, aren't I less of a man if I get anxious in these situations and I can't handle it, navigate it as well as I'd like to? And I said, no,
Right.
it's not a man issue. It's you. You have to work through these things, and everyone has things to work on. And you're young yet, and so you have your whole life to work on these things. And people feel like there's this duration, like by the time
Uh,
I'm 30, I'm not going to be triggered by this, and
right.
I'm not going to be anxious, or whatever the thing that happens to be. I should be done with that. And no one's going to want to be in my space if I'm being anxious. And I'm thinking, if we were all like looking at what everyone else was doing and feeding off of that emotional energy, and thinking that everyone thinks that we're less than, we're never going to be able to escape that.
Exactly, Linda. And that's the thing. I think another thing too, Linda, is that like the shutting down, it doesn't go away by like ignoring it. And I think it eases slowly, but it eases when you slowly like work through what's caused you to feel like that in the first place, right? I think it's like, for example, I think you have to start by thinking of it like, okay, like your body is hitting the pause button to protect you. And I think to unfreeze it, you have to feel safe enough to press play again. And I think that that happens through things like talking it out, grounding yourself, doing some deep breathing, and just really kind of noticing your emotions, like you said, instead of running from them, and letting your nervous system know it's okay, I'm okay, I'm not in danger anymore. Because while your body can talk to you, your, your body's not another person. So you can't say, I'm okay now. You have to go through it gently with support and at your own pace. I think that's how your body learns that it's safe enough to let go. And that brings you back to just being graceful with yourself, having grace, you know?
Yeah. Thank you for just reiterating about that it's okay, because I think that's where the stick
Yeah,
is it's okay not to be okay. And I know that
exactly.
it's a
Okay.
phrase that's very used,
Yeah,
and rightly so, but I think it's the most accurate thing, that's a simple thing to say to anyone that is shutting down. So besides giving grace to yourself when you find yourself shutting down, what else could a person do? Because I think that would be really important for everyone that's listening is like, what else is there besides that?
I think there's so much that you can do. I think giving grace is like one tool, but I think you have to like name what's happening, number one. Like even like saying to yourself, like for example, I'd say, all right, Eugene, I'm starting to shut down. That brings you back into the awareness. Like it gives you space to breathe. And if you're saying it, it brings the power to your brain to travel throughout your body. And I think you also have to kind of ground yourself, like do some deep breathing or recognize like your feet on the ground and just acknowledge that your feet are on the ground. And then feel your feet on the ground and just slowly do like a body scan. Feel your emotions from your feet all the way up to the top of your head. And then go back down. Like put your feet flat on the floor, sit back in your chair, touch something with texture, because that'll allow your body feel safe and it'll allow your body to feel like very present. And I think it's okay to also like move a little too. If you're in a situation and you can move, you can like roll your shoulders, stand up, go to the bathroom, because the having those movement signals are enabling your brain to 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 work. And it signals to your brain that you're not like stuck. So you won't really be shut down. And I also think too, it's important to be in a space where you feel safe. We have to talk about that. You have to share it with someone that you trust. Like, I'm overwhelmed. I need a second. That can stop you shutting down from, that can stop the shutting down from prolonging. And I think that it's not always the easiest thing to say to a person that I'm overwhelmed. I need a second. And I can also understand that if somebody else is heightened in that situation as well, and it's like a heated type of thing, they might follow you. And I think the best thing that you can do is just continue saying, I need a second, I need space, and you get to your safe space. If that's closing the door and closing your ears, just to take some time to take some deep breaths to get yourself out of the situation where you feel unsafe to where you're shutting down, that helps to ground your body. And then you can come out, apologize, and say, okay, this is what happened, and this is what I need moving forward. It's so important to recognize that there's so much power in vulnerability. And if you're transparent and you're honest about where you are, I mean, I think that also accompanies having a good relationship with yourself and feeling safe in your environment by being able to say, okay, this is hard for me right now. I need a break. But like I said, you also have to be in a safe situation to do so with a safe person.
I
So that
agree
person
with all
will
of,
respect you enough to do that, you know?
I agree with all of these things that you're sharing. And so like the other thing that comes up is a lot of men suffer what we call in silence, where they rather than saying that they need help, rather than saying I need I need um I don't think that there's a lot there's not a lot of education awareness that goes into teaching anyone how to advocate for their needs and to how to ask for them. So it feels really foreign. And so
Yeah.
you're saying that a person, when they get in a safe space, then they can do that. So what does a person do that's maybe not in a safe space and they haven't really learned how to ask for what they need to get there? What else could they do when they find themselves in that place like that?
Um, I think if the person isn't like in a safe space to do that, I think you have to get yourself through it without making things worse. Because you have to think about it. This is you versus you. You have to get through these emotions without making things worse for your body or your mind, because then that makes things worse for yourself holistically. And I think the first thing that you can kind of do is just start small and focus on just getting through the moment, surviving the emotion that you're feeling, not fixing the feeling in its entirety. Keeping yourself just like steady enough, grounded enough to just get through the situation or to get out of the situation safely is one. I think you also don't have to process anything right there, like verbally. You can also say like, okay, you can have those conversations in your brain. Like, because quiet grounding, I think, is also okay too. Like again, like that body scan, you don't have to do it out loud. You can do it, you know, quietly. Um, I think also just having positive self-talk, like I am okay. This situation is happening, but it's not a reflection of me. And also just kind of telling yourself things like, even though I'm in this situation, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm less of a man. Just because I'm not able to talk about my feelings, that doesn't mean I'm less than a man. You
Mhm.
have to just kind of do small things to kind of remind yourself that this is temporarily. This is temporary. And even saying this is a temporary emotion, saying that silently also helps your body like hold on until you're out of like that silence where you shut down. Does that make sense?
It does, and so what I'm thinking at when as you're speaking through this, so if you're experiencing those emotions and you're not comfortable or safe yet expressing them, then it's perfectly okay to be able to self-soothe yourself
Hmm.
until you're out of that particular moment. And so then you're grounded back down. And then that's when you could figure out other ways to reach out to people that you trust to have the conversation. Because I will find that not everyone wants to open up their business to other people, that they would rather try and handle it themselves. And so I think there's a place and a space to initially, handle things yourself, get back
Yeah.
grounded until you can actually think coherently. And then you're like, oh, I realize that I'm shutting down during this particular type of occurrence. And so I think that I would like to find someone that I can talk to that I trust. So that way when it happens again, I'm in a different space because maybe somebody else has another perspective or a way they go about it that you could learn from and they could help you.
Exactly. I think that's such a good idea. You're 100% right. And just learning that collective healing is okay. Learning from other people is okay. Also, I think is really, really important too.
Let's see where else where we like to take the conversation. We've covered listening to our body with somatics. We've talked about uh, naming the emotion or the feeling when it happens and getting grounded. We've talked about being authentic to who you are without
Yeah.
putting the label that you have to show up being a man in a certain way because there's all different types of men. And
Yeah.
and so you don't necessarily have to aspire to any one of society's categories.
Yeah.
And then we've also spoken to you know that if your way of working through things is with yourself, that's good until you get to the point where being surrounded with other people that could help you could give you some other perspectives and options that you could choose from. And I think the last thing that really we were speaking to is that drop the idea that there's a timeline in this. So
And and I think we have to drop the idea of like that whole real man thing. Like toxic masculinity. Like I think in my opinion, Eugene's opinion, I think that toxic masculinity is they have a set of like rules that are really harmful that a lot of men they follow sometimes, or most of the time subconsciously. Emotional numbness, dominance, silence. Like, and I recognize that it's this pressure to kind of like perform a vision of manhood that disconnects you from your emotional lives and from other people. And I think we really have to kind of work together to recognize that we don't have to be what we've seen, we don't have to be what we've read, we don't have to be what we might have come from, but our only goal should be the best version of ourselves, right? And when I think about toxic masculinity, I recognize that that's robbing people of that opportunity. Because again, I feel like it's a set of rules that are extremely harmful that is harming so many different men. Because again, like it's this pressure that you have. It's almost like that peer pressure that you talk about in elementary school, fifth grade. This also is a sense of peer pressure, I believe, as well.
You're right. It is a form of peer pressure. And what I'm thinking of about this peer pressure, all of a sudden it becomes actualized that
Yeah,
that you have to be this certain way. And what we're talking about in our conversation today is that it's healthier to move away from that performance based, this is what I have to do, this is how I'm going to show up, and instead choose choose to show up in a way that feels good to you, because
right.
then you are in congruence with that and you're in alignment. Then all of the problems that we've been discussing about shutting down and not being able to regulate and manage it, they start to go away because you're not wrestling with yourself anymore.
Exactly, Linda. And I think that's the thing. We got to stop that. We have to work together in um, a sense of solidarity to recognize that that's played out. You know, I think with a lot of men that are dealing with these things, like the silence, all of these different things, you probably feel extremely tired because you've most likely have spent so long being a strong one that you might not notice how much it's really costing you until you're extremely drained and you're pouring out that fatigue in so many different ways. And I recognize that for a lot of men, silence is not something that um is something that can be upheld for so long to be masked as strength. Because really what ends up happening is that when you're in isolation, it comes out and it doesn't always come out in the most healthiest way. And so I think it's so important that we recognize from the very beginning to kiss our, young boys on their forehead and let them know that they're loved. Let them know that, they're cared for. Let them know that it's okay to feel how they feel. Let them know that it is okay to cry. In schools, educational settings, we need to stop punishing emotion, um, and embrace that. In friend groups, we really need to kind of be in a space where we can be vulnerable and not have it be treated as like a weakness or have it be like weaponized in workplaces. We need to stop celebrating like burnout and calling it dedication because that these emotions can come out there too. I realize that like these things can move extremely quickly, but they can also move extremely quietly. And they can look different for different men, different people. And I think with a lot of men, it can show up. without them realizing, again, like those rules of toxic masculinity, silence, strength, self-reliance, like these things can really show up in different ways. And we need to kind of attack it in the same institutions, in these same environments that help to define us.
So really, it's about modeling the way. And so if you see a man struggling in your friend group, you're going to say, "Hey, it seems like you're carrying a lot of load right now, and you're, seeming like your energy is drained, and it doesn't seem like that's working for you. Can we talk about this?"
And I
And
think that's the thing, Linda. Like these things are okay to do, and we don't do enough of that. These things are okay to do. We don't do enough of that. I do it with my friends. Um, I have really great friends, really great dudes around me. But it wasn't always like that. I had to learn a lot of these things that I'm saying. Not only are they through like research and coursework, but they're also through experience, right? I recognize that we have to be the change, and our attitudes, our actions, they're contagious. And if somebody sees you doing something, they're gonna do it too, you know?
it's really true. Our actions are contagious, and
Yeah.
so it begins with us, and we can change all of the generational things that have happened because how things were many, many years ago, or even for our parents and grandparents, life has changed as we know it because it does. We evolve, the times evolve, and so for me, I really would like to see our world moving to a place where whether you're a man or a woman and you see somebody suffering or having a hard time, that we just don't walk on by and not say anything, that we're committed enough as another human being to help another human being. Because in the reverse situation, we would be so thankful if somebody stopped to take the time to acknowledge where they see us too if we're struggling. And I think that more and more of that is happening, but I think there's more and more work to do. And definitely it's not a gender issue, it's a human issue. However, sometimes it helps to have gender groups to be of other people that's of your gender that you can work through this on and learn how to do it. And then do that in a space where you can do that. And then you can be in a maybe a mixed group, which is what I advocate for, is because if you have both male and female perspectives on a lot of these topics, it's going to be helpful because men and women do process and communicate and move through relationships with differences. There's a lot of commonality, but there are some differences in recognizing what those are. And I always say, what can we do that will be helpful, and what should we stop doing that's hurtful or harmful, and have those conversations, not shy away from them.
I agree. I think we have to also make honesty normal. You have to really model emotion in your own lives. You have to build environments where people don't have to choose between identity and their humanity, masculinity, femininity. We just need to be human.
Yes.
Need to be human. And that can look differently to so many different people. Like, and that brings me back to my initial point in the very beginning. Being vulnerable doesn't take away from my masculinity. Instead, I feel like it's my superpower. Being vulnerable can allow people the opportunity to learn, to resonate, also be inspired. You never know what impact your vulnerability will have on somebody. And that's what I carry in my head every single day, being the person that I am, because I recognize me sharing my emotions, me talking about my emotions, me sharing about how something has affected me doesn't take away from my masculinity, despite what people say. And that's how I kind of live my life. And I recognize we have to, as a society, stick together and not contribute to that whole stereotype that men have to be zip locked and don't have to talk about their emotions, because we definitely need to continue doing that. We need to start doing it some more.
I love everything that you have said around this. And you know what makes me even more excited is that you're a young person. And so if you are already having this wisdom at this young age, and you've had these exposures to what healthy masculinity looks like, how being a healthy human looks like, and you're able to embrace and embody that, and then make that committed, I guess committed or what am I trying to say here? Making that commitment that it goes beyond you. It's
Yeah.
outside, like it's in your friend circle. It's in the people you work with. It's in with your families. So that's like something that you can lead with, because that's how we impact changes is to start with ourselves and then expand it out. And it takes courage to do that kind of work, because you're going to be met with resistance sometimes, but you do it anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Resilience is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
I think being resilient is incredibly important, but we don't recognize that enough. We need to start being resilient and being resilient in community with one another.
Yes, resiliency is the way forward. And I'm really glad that we've had this chat today. I think we have discussed and unpacked a lot of different themes that our audience will really resonate with. And so um, I know that there are other things that we didn't get into today, and we could do that in the future. But what would be like the one thing out of today's conversation that you would like to leave our listeners with? What message is that?
I think I would just say that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be strong to deserve love. You don't have to be strong to operate in society, but being vulnerable and having the courage to do so is just enough. And so I would want to encourage all of the people that are listening to do that, to recognize that being vulnerable is a strength, despite what people might say. Being vulnerable set me free, and being vulnerable is changing lives every single day. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you for that message. And thank
Yeah,
you for coming on the show today.
it's been a pleasure.